welcome to Runner Wednesday. We have three panelists here with us. We have the ASI President, Vanessa Chicaiza. We have Krystal Raynes, the new trustee on the board of student trustee on the CSU board, and Ignacio Castillo, the new VP of Legislative Affairs for ASI. So I'm super excited to talk to you all. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate. I think it'll be great. And this event will be recorded and posted in part on YouTube as part of a highlights reel for the runner. So just so everybody knows. Today, we're going to be addressing three main topics: the importance of voting, the youth vote, and how to make your vote count, followed by a Q&A. So when it comes to the Q&A portion, you can either raise your hand or leave your questions in the chat. Either way is fine. And you can also, if you want, include which person or which panelist your question is directed toward, and that will make things even easier for all of us. So let's start off with the importance of voting. And I'll start with you, Vanessa. What has led you to be civically active, and how do you perceive your peers who aren't voting?
Well, I was thinking about this, and when you hear people talk about the importance of voting, somebody can tell you the importance of voting every single day, but I think it's really important that we identify what's important to us, find what moves us, what inspires us to get out there and create the change that we want to see. You hear that a lot, especially this year we're calling for change. And so it's really identifying what's important to me and what do I want my future to look like? What do I want the future to look like for people that I identify with? And I think that that's really, really important when you look at why is voting important, not only for me, but for others as well. And so for those that aren't civically engaged, I encourage them to go out there. And I think it begins with educating yourself on what's going on right now. What are the issues that are impacting me, the people that I love? And, where does my responsibility lie in changing that? So.
And how does it feel when you have your peers who are not civically engaged or feel really disenfranchised and don't want to vote at all?
Yeah, I think disenfranchisement is a big problem, and we see it all the time, especially right now when things are a little bit hectic. That can really inspire people to get even more civically engaged, but for some people it becomes really overwhelming. And I think that it's important to maybe just let them know that it's normal to feel overwhelmed at times, but then again, to continue to remind them to go, seek within themselves and figure out what's important to me, what is happening right now that I don't like, and realizing that their voice does matter, and to get out there and voice your opinion so that change can actually happen.
Okay, and I'll turn this over to you, Krystal. What led you to become civically engaged?
Yeah, first I want to say thank you for the question. It's an honor to be here in this space. I love talking to students about civic engagement and voting. What led me to be civically engaged? My background, my parents came both from the Philippines, and they worked really, really hard to get their immigration and become a citizen. I myself am a dual citizen of America and the Philippines. And so, what led me to become civically engaged, especially this election season. In high school, you have your government teachers that tell you, go vote. We're going to teach you how to get, even if you can't vote yet, we're going to get you early started. Like, we'll register you for the next election, or we'll teach you how to fill out your voter registration. So when you can register to vote when you're 18, to go get registered to vote. But what really pushed me, my first election that I voted in was the 2016 election. And what really pushed me to vote was the issues that were on the table. And, casting your vote, you're not just voting for like the president. Everybody, there's a lot of debate when it comes to voting for the president. Some people don't feel like they're represented enough for the president. presidency vote. But even putting that aside, you're voting for your city council, your state, your fellow representatives, and those people really make the legislation that affects you more pertinently than like the president. And so all that stuff is really important to me. My voice and making sure that I have good roads, making sure that the kids that I work with or the kids in the future have good education systems, like school boards and stuff like that. And so the future, as well as my generation, the peers around me, really encourage me to vote because I just want a better future. So that's me.
And what is it like for you when you see your peers who aren't civically engaged?
Like Vanessa said, I know there's a lot of just the feeling of being overwhelmed, especially, COVID, and there's people that are still struggling to find a job, or, they can't take time off to work historically. Now that we have, the ballots mailed to us, that gives a lot more time, more accessibility. But we also have to give some light to the fact that there is some history of civic disengagement. We had the Black and Brown Healing Project come out on virtual campus, I suppose, and they talked about how Black and Brown folk, they have historically been intimidated at the polls, and so it's breaking that cycle. So it's really hard for those people that have that history to break that cycle because it's ingrained in them. Like, hey, I don't think my voice matters. And so that's a valid concern, but it's our job as reps, trustees, ASI, to help break some of those stigmas that have been ingrained in them.
Thank you. And Ignacio, what has led you to become civically engaged?
Well, for me, it has been a long journey. Ever since I was in high school, I knew that I had a passion for creating change, especially in my local community here in the Central Valley. I did many competitions that was like towards academics, towards like civic engagement, and that really led me to know that the Central Valley has a really unique perspective when it comes to our voices. And a lot of that comes, I think, with the Latino vote. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to become civically engaged, because we as people had a really big opportunity to shift how politics work here. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I decided to do political science as my major. And I wanted to get involved here in ASI because I knew that I had the ability to create change and unite voices for our students. I did Lobby Corps last year, and that really helped me lobby on issues for students. And many of these issues were affecting a lot of our different students in many different ways. I worked on student advocacy, on financial aid, and those really gave me a really big perspective on knowing that if we are able to persuade our legislators into voting a certain way for students, it's a really big issue because we know that we can also, these people's names are also in the ballot as well. So, we have the ability to create that change as CSUB students. And now being in this position as vice president, we're in days away from an election. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I want to make sure that students know who they're voting for and what they're voting for. In this election also, we know that it's drastic times, but at the same time, we as students have the ability to create drastic measures as well.
And for you, what is it like when you see your peers who aren't civically engaged?
Sometimes I am a little shocked because, I have built myself to this position and idea that everyone has to be civically engaged. And I understand, and I want to reiterate what people say, that sometimes their voice may not be heard, and that's not the case. Like, we know that even here in the Central Valley, one of the congressional seats in 2018 was up for we know that, for example, in 2018, David Valadeo in the 21st Congressional District, he lost his seat with TJ Cox, and it was a big deal because he lost it by 800 votes. Even then, you can absolutely see that people's votes do matter. 800 votes completely shifted someone out of the House of Representatives from the Central Valley And TJ Cox was one of the 7 people that flipped seats in California in 2018. So I want to emphasize that your vote and your voice does matter, because you can completely unseat someone and have someone new to represent you in Congress.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to focusing on the youth vote. According to research by the Pew Center, the millennial voter turnout actually doubled between 2014 and 2018, despite the millennial vote being notoriously low previously. Do you think that the millennial vote will continue to rise? And do you think that Gen Z will follow with them? And I'll start with you, Krystal.
Thank you, Paige, for that question. I love that question. So I think with historically trends, the older you get, the more higher chance you have of voting. And I was looking into it a little bit before this, that older people tend to vote more because they have that habit that they have. Younger people have never voted before, only voted once or twice, and so it's not a habit that they have formed yet. And so I think that especially with the millennial vote, it's going to keep increasing just historically. As you get older, I think it's going to increase. And with Gen Z, I really have a lot of hope, because I've been talking to a lot of older people, 50s, 60s, 70s. And I asked them, like, hey, what do you feel about today's political climate? What do you see in the youth? Like people that have lived through the Vietnam War, people that have lived through the Civil Rights Movement, like, what do you think? Like, what's your opinion of the youth right now? And listening to their stories and listening to different podcasts that people talk on, they say that this generation, the younger generation, is different. I definitely think it's because of social media and how often we're bombarded with vote, 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 become civically engaged, attend this protest, all this different information to become civically engaged, even if you can't vote. And so I really hope that with the advent of social media, that the youth vote is going to become more and more, is going to rise. I'm really hopeful for that. And so I really hope that the youth vote rises. I know that my friends who typically don't vote or don't educate themselves on these issues, because before they felt like their voice doesn't matter. Now, because all this information is being shared, that they feel like their voice does matter, and it does. And so I'm really inspired by that. I'm inspired by my peers, and I'm inspired by this generation of youth leaders.
Thank you. Ignacio, are you seeing similar trends with the people that the millennials or the Gen Zs, in increasing their likelihood to vote?
I think, yeah, one of the biggest reasons even then, to add on to what Krystal said, is that, yeah, people are more civically engaged because we know that more than ever, the stakes are high. And we know that in this election, we know that also that comes with the Supreme Court justice seat. We know that a lot of things are up in stake as well as that. We know that maybe my rights as an LGBT member may be at stake. And I never really took that into perspective as much, because I know that Bergefell was president, but recognizing that kind of issue does scare me. And I'm scared for many people who are women, who are LGBT, because we know that we have the ability to create change with our vote when we place our vote for someone. And sometimes it's scary, but I know that we as people have the ability to make sure that we reflect our voices adequately. And I know that a lot of millennials and Gen Z are registering to vote. And that's one of the best amazing things, is that all of us are able to unite our voices together, because we are all some way, somehow able to connect to these issues.
Do you think that sense of like fear or urgency is contributing to the fact that these younger people are starting to vote much more?
Most definitely, honestly, because I think the biggest part in that is that they're going to live through this generation. I think climate change is one of the biggest issues why students are so engaged. They're like, okay, well, these people who are in the legislature, who are in the Senate, are 60, 70 years old. They are not going to live through the effects of climate change. And we are the ones who are going to see it, and we already are seeing that. And that's one of the biggest issues that I as myself is taking in that towards the ballot. I'm taking that as a big issue because we know that the stakes are high in California as well. So that's one of the biggest issues. We know that for women, there's other issues as well that they are going to take personally to themselves in the ballot. For me, as an LGBT member, I take those as well in the ballot. And there's many different reasons, even if they're small. I think that that's enough for you uh, to get that issue, represented and voiced out whenever you get your ballot.
Thank you, Ignacio. So for you, Vanessa, are you hopeful that millennials and Gen Z will continue to vote in increasing numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Krystal and Ignacio brought up some really great points. And when we look, historically, the youth has always been the demographic to really push things forward and create change. And so I am really, really hopeful. And I think that that hope is something that really drives a lot of us. I think it's when we begin to lose hope where things like disenfranchisement begin to happen. But for the most part, I see it all the time. And even though we are going through really tough times, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's so many things happening on in the world, but I think the one thing that is continuing to motivate the youth, especially, is knowing that we have control of our futures. We have a say in what our future looks like, not only for ourselves and the people that we love, but for those that come after us. And I think that that's something that really distinguishes the youth from maybe those that are a little bit older, is that I feel, are really aware of the impacts that we want to leave behind as well. So voting is so extremely important because I feel as if the youth really takes into account those that come after us. So
Thank you. So that'll lead into our second question, which is, how are you encouraging more young people to vote? And I'll start with you, Vanessa.
Well, like I mentioned a little bit in the beginning, I think that we hear it all the time. We see it all over social media, to go and vote. And sometimes that can become a little bit redundant, but I think what's really important is, like Ignacio was saying, like Krystal was saying, is to share our personal stories, because that's how we really bring attention to these issues. And sometimes when people vote, you're not only just voting for yourself. Maybe I don't identify with a certain population of people, but that doesn't mean that those issues aren't important to me. And so it's recognizing that my vote carries so much more weight than just how is it going to impact me, how is it going to impact my friends, my colleagues, those that I care about. And so I think that it's important to educate ourselves and work to educate others as well. And so that's something that it's the ASI's role as well. It's not our position to tell you how to vote, but it's providing you the resources necessary to really inform yourself about all of the different issues out there, and also the process. How do I vote? There's a lot of first-time voters that maybe their parents don't have the ability to vote, and so you may feel a little bit lost. I've never voted before. I don't have somebody to kind of guide me through the process, and so it's our responsibility as ASI and CUCB as well to inform students. So I think all of those different factors really go into how we encourage individuals to vote.
Thank you. And Krystal, how are you encouraging people to vote?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm always on my social media, and I think that's where a lot of the youth is. And so sharing those resources, and especially talking to my friends, like, hey, did you vote? I think one of the most important things that you can do to make sure that people around you vote is help them make a voting plan, making sure that like, hey, did you register to vote? Hey, are you going to vote in person? Which there are some polling places that are open in person still, and you can vote, you can register in person still within 14 days. We telling people, hey, CUCB is a ballot drop-off place, and I think BC is too. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are so many, and just letting them know, the more and more that people know that these resources are there for them, that there's a support system for them, that, hey, like a voting plan is a thing, that to keep them accountable. I think that's where we start getting those people turned out to vote. The more that we put it on their feed, the more it's normalized. And so, rather than, hey, are you going to vote? It's a, hey, when are you going to vote? I really hope that conversation turns like that. And I think it is. And so that's what makes me really happy.
Thank you. Ignacio, how are you encouraging your peers and the people around you to get out and vote?
Well, to add on to what Krystal said, one of the biggest things I do as well is social media, of course, because, right now we're in a few days from an election, of course, and it's important to let students know how to do it as well, because I think there's still a lot of blank lines on how to vote or how to like turn in your ballot. Also making sure that you also sign your ballot as well. There's a lot of people who kind of forget that. And that's a big issue there because of course your ballot won't be counted. You can also drop it off at, your mailbox or at any polling place on November 3rd. And, if you didn't register to vote on the 19th, it's fine. You can also conditionally register at your county elections office. Or you can also just do same day registration on November 3rd. But also one of the biggest things I'm doing with my lobby corps team, and being in this position of legislative affairs, we're creating next week a open candidate forum where we'll be discussing our different topics with our elected officials, to let students know who are they voting for, because a lot of the many times students don't really focus on which candidate best represents them, and it can be very kind of difficult sometimes because we are students, we are focusing on higher education, we're focusing on COVID-19 and the reopening process, and I think those are the biggest issues that are going to affect us in the next coming year. And that's one of the biggest things I want to emphasize on. And that's one of the biggest work I'm doing right now, days leading up to the election. And I'm pretty excited.
Thank you. I have to ask, I'm forgetful, I apologize. Have I asked this question to each of you already? Just a thumbs up as yes, you've been asked the question. Okay, perfect. I had to make sure. So moving on, we're going to talk about how to make your vote count. So I think I'll start with just a broad question with you, Ignacio. How can students make their vote count?
So one of the biggest things is to make their vote count is, of course, receiving your ballot and making sure you fill it out properly. But one of the biggest things I want to emphasize on that is that the ballot is not a test. If you do not know what you're voting for, don't fill it out. If you do not know what a proposition means, leave it blank. It's fine. You'll do fine. It's not a test. You're not getting graded. Just fill out what you know. Just fill out, even if you're just voting for the president. Okay, good. That's it. But we are not trying to emphasize to students that you have to fill out everything without even knowing what's on the ballot. And that's fine. Even sometimes we know that the wording on propositions or on the ballot, it's confusing. And it shouldn't feel like that. And I want to make sure that students know that. Also make sure that you, of course, sign it and seal it as well and turn it in. Also, if you're not even able to register to vote, you can still do a lot of important things like phone banking. Is also very important, sending out letters, or working for your preferred candidate. I think that's one of the biggest things you can do in the days leading to the election. And I think that's one of the biggest things about civic engagement is that if you feel very strongly towards someone when it comes to these candidates, you can always do some work for them to help them, get elected again or get elected in the next coming days.
Thank you. Vanessa, how can students make their votes count?
I think it goes back to something I mentioned earlier, and something that Ignacio also brings up is to really do our best in educating ourselves. I know it's really hard sometimes because, like Ignacio said, the language can be a little bit confusing, and you get those guides where it says, what does a yes mean and what does a no mean? And the language is really confusing sometimes, but I think doing our best to really educate ourselves. I believe there's a website called Ballot Ready, and that really is a place where individuals can go and check everything out, learn about the different things that are going to be on the ballot. And that is, I think, one of the most important things. And like Ignacio said, it's not a test. You don't have to fill everything out. And if you don't know something, maybe if you have enough time and if you feel the need, you can Google it. We're so lucky to have information so readily available. So if I don't know, what does this mean, or what does a yes vote mean or a no vote mean, I can go online and kind of find the answers. And so that's how I think that people can really make their vote count, is to really have substance behind, the little bubbles that I fill in. So.
Thank you. And you, Krystal, how can students make their votes count?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, Ignacio and Vanessa touched on some really good points, especially ballotready.org, I think. I'll drop the link in the chat. But it's an amazing resource. It's nonpartisan. It both gives the yes and the no, especially when it comes to propositions, because propositions are so important. There's a lot of propositions that affect us, higher ed, as well as the older generation, our generation. And so it's really important to get educated on those propositions. And like Vanessa said, the paper voting guide that you can get, it can be really intimidating. It's a really big, thick guide, and it looks kind of like an SAT. So it's kind of scary to me personally. And so, looking it up online really helps it to become more manageable. Ballot Ready gives you literally bam, 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 bullet point, yes, no, yes, no. And so it's so straightforward. I really use that. I use that tool when I voted. And also, if you align with a certain organization, then there's a lot of organizations posting voting guides. And so they'll put their own spin on hey, this is why our organization encourages you to vote this way for a proposition. And so that also, you can take that in consideration as well. Definitely the research is at your fingertips, and just basically just be on social media. Your friends, your family are all posting about politics. It's hard to, get away from that conversation. So just pay attention and be open. And if you're curious about something, Google it.
Thank you. So our last question before the Q&A has to do with the ASI spring elections, actually. So for this one's for you, Vanessa. I know that the runner is really struggling with engagement and getting people to actually interact, because we're online and there are so many new freshmen who are unaware of what CSUB has to offer in terms of programs and resources like the runner. Is ASI facing the same sort of problems? And if so, how will ASI be encouraging students to participate in the spring elections?
Yeah, I think it can be really difficult. Something that ASI has been doing, and we get a lot of student feedback this way, is our Takeout Tuesday surveys. And we've been doing this since spring 2020, and we continue to do it. And something that students are saying is that they are feeling overwhelmed, and a lot of them are busy with their lives, with keeping up with their assignments. I'm sorry, you can hear my cat in the background, but yeah. So and it's really important that we recognize this and we start thinking about the different challenges that we may face in the future, and start now thinking about, ways to really make sure that we reach, all pockets of our campus. And that may be, reaching out in different ways. I know a lot of students, surprisingly, what we're finding is that a lot of students do check their emails, which may surprise some of us, but, it's also, finding different ways. I know sometimes we can reach students through text message, and that's something that I've been suggesting as well. Some students don't check their emails, and like you said, maybe some that are freshmen and they don't know that you can have the app on your phone, and they think they need a laptop to access their email, and it can be a little bit more difficult to do it that way. But it's providing them with little tips like that to make it so that this information is more readily available to them. So I think it's definitely a challenge, but I think it's one that we are working towards now, towards, figuring out what are the obstacles that lie in our way, and working towards like breaking them down a little bit.
Thank you. So that concludes the roundtable, and we're going to move into the Q&A portion. So as I said at the beginning, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand in the participants window or leave a question in the chat. And if your question is specific to one person, you can also include that in your chat box as well. So I'll give it a second for some questions to start trickling in.
I don't see any questions yet coming in, but maybe I can break the ice with one.
Yeah.
I love inspiring anecdotes, and I've loved hearing all of your personal stories about what has inspired you to become civically involved. And I'm just wondering if each of the three panelists have actually voted in this election yet. And if so, what did that process feel like to you personally?
So I can start off. So yeah, I already voted in the election. I got my ballot in the mail, filled it all out. I actually filled it out in the parking lot of the CSU parking lot in Arcado. I helped set up the ballot box. I think it was like last Saturday. It was last Saturday we set it up. And so at CSU, it's super easy. Okay, so what you want to make sure you do is you fill out your ballot, make sure it's sealed, you sign it. And even if you have a question about the ballot, like, hey, is this okay? You can like show it to the ballot. They can't tell you what to vote, but like, hey, is this okay? You can show it to the ballot worker. They can be like, yeah, you're good. Just seal it, sign it, make sure you're good. And then you hand it over in your car. You drive up to their Cardo in that little loop, hand it to the poll worker. They'll take it. They'll drop it off in the little box. You can see them drop it off in the little box, and you just drive home. So it's super easy, super fast. As long as you like do research. And again, it's not like an SAT test. You don't have to fill out every single bubble. And just make sure that you fill out each bubble in black or blue pen, or that you fill out black, blue pen, and make sure you sign that ballot, seal it, and send it over.
Yeah, to add on to what Krystal said, well, for me, my first election was the primaries in March, because I'm a sophomore right now. I'm like 19, so I didn't really vote in 2018. But it was ecstatic. It was amazing because it was amazing because there was a lot of students who I knew who were also voting, and it's amazing because we were able to see the results then and there of like the presidential candidates and the people in the assembly, everyone else who was running. You got to see your votes slowly get counted, and it's amazing. So for me, that was an amazing opportunity. I know with this election is going to be another amazing opportunity to see my my vote counted when it comes to the popular vote. So it's really an amazing experience because you're doing something that we as citizens have the ability to do, which is civic engagement. For me, I also take in the perspective that my parents can't vote, so I want to make sure that I'm able to represent my parents when it comes to the ballot, to make sure that their voices are also being heard as well.
And yeah, I mean, to finish off, answering that question, it really does feel empowering because it lets me know, I did my part. And at times that is the most important thing, to just, realize that I did what I could. And so it makes me feel like a part of my society, so a part of something bigger.
So we have a question from Emilio that says, how do we learn more about our local government?
So one of the biggest things that you can do is also through the digital era right now, we can pretty much look at what our local government focuses on. Of course, we have the local mayor as well as the Bakersfield City Council, which focuses mostly primarily on the city of Bakersfield. Many of the people who are in the city council are running for re-election. But to the broader scope of everything in Kern County, we do have the Board of Supervisors, which consists of 6 people or 5 people. Okay, good. Yeah, close. But yes, and that's of course through um, Kern County, and you can also look it up through online and know what they are running for again, what their statements are. And also, because it's also important not just to focus, of course, in people in the federal level or in the state, but also in our local government, because, the way we live in our local communities, for example, like district attorneys, they also do a really big part when it comes to the safety and well-being of our community and neighborhood. They implement a lot of different ways of policing or different methods of taking care of our neighborhoods. That's also one of the biggest things when it comes to these elections, is that the district attorney does have, um, you know, the chance to be elected by the people.
Okay, next we have from Blake. For anyone, thoughts on voting blue in a dominantly red state or vice versa? Does your vote still count then?
I can take that question. So definitely. So that's when I say a lot of, especially younger voters, they feel like, when they vote for president, their vote doesn't really matter because they like go to college. And so putting the presidency aside, there's still a bunch of other people to vote for. Ignacio was talking about city council, super important. When we're talking about like what happened over the summer, BLM, your city council determines the police budget. And so, and you vote for those people. And I think, so Kern County is predominantly red county, getting it more specific, but in the state, we have a Democrat and a Republican representing us, Rudy Salas, and we have Vince Vaughn. And so you can see like your vote matters, even when it comes to like different wards, different districts, because it gets so specific there. And so your voice definitely does matter. Your voice definitely matters for those legislators that, again, make those policies that affect you more pertinently than a president would. Your congressional representatives, your state representatives, and your city council.
We've got another one from Ron. He said, it was nice to hear that all of you spoke about how important it is to not only just vote, but to make sure you're educated about what you're voting. For each of you, how difficult is it to keep your personal biases from creeping into what you're sharing with the students?
So I can begin. For me, I am extremely aware. It's something that is at the forefront of when we do post, because it is, I feel it's my responsibility to make sure that we are sharing solely information and not trying to persuade anyone to vote a certain way, especially as a student run organization, a student funded organization. We have to represent all perspectives. And so the only way to really do that is to just provide neutral information. And so we are just a source of information, and my politics, my own personal beliefs is kept completely separate. And that's something that it's so extremely important to me. So for me, it's for, my personal bias is creeping into that. It's not hard at all to keep those separated.
Vivian asks, did Ignacio say there was going to be a forum explaining what students should do as far as voting?
So yeah, so let me further explain that. So we're going to be focusing primarily on assembly members and Congress members. So what we have in the next coming days, so on Monday, we plan to have Rudy Salas and his opponent to have a discourse on the issues that affect students in terms of higher education, COVID, and the reopening process. We're just asking for their perspectives and also letting know that students do have a big voice. And that's something that I want to really emphasize on, is that our voices are really important, because, you know, these are elected officials who are going to take drastic votes when it comes to the state legislature. On Tuesday, we plan to have Vince Fong as well with his opponent. And then Thursday, we plan to have the 21st Congressional District. So it's TJ Cox and David Valadeo. We know that it's a very important election as well because of many different reasons. And of course, Thursday, we will finish with the 23rd Congressional District with Kevin McCarthy and his opponent as well. But we're still adjusting times and estimates on what time it will be. But yeah, I'm pretty excited, and I'm really happy that this question was brought up, because it's really important for students to also be knowledge on this kind of like project. You can also follow us on ASI Legislative Affairs to know any further updates on this whole event happening next week.
We have a question from Destiny. For those who voted in person last election on election day, how long would you estimate you waited in line? I get things will be different because of COVID and such, but they were unsure how long they should expect day of voting to take.
So I voted in the last election day of, and I had actually filed a provisional ballot because I had no idea where my mail-in ballot was. I always get my mail-in ballot, and so it took me. I was helped almost instantly. I lived super close to school, and so there is like a polling place and a church next to the Walmart Gosford, and so I went. That was my polling place last time. And they helped me almost immediately. With this election, though, I know that there is less polling places, and so there's like more people going to less polling places. And so, you know, when it comes to voting day, I would bring a snack. I have no idea. So bring a snack, bring some water, and bring a positive attitude.
We have a question from Adamari. For those who are first-time voters planning to vote in person, what advice do you give them about possible protesters who may try to change their mind or intimidate them while waiting in line?
So what I would say to that is, you know, you got to stand strong in your beliefs. We all are raised with a specific issue in mind, but you know, in the end of the day, you know, we're voting for something that we specifically believe in, and if people, you know, make you feel any different, you know, you have to stand strong. Like sometimes, you know, sometimes you may be the only person in the room with that belief, but you got to stand strong and make sure that you have a very solid case for why you're believing in that. I think many of us forget that we may be shifted to a whole different perspective without having any reason other than pressure. But you know, we as humans have the capability of forming our own judgment, our own capability to make sure that we know what we're voting for as well. You know, this is not an issue on, you know, you shouldn't be pressured to not believe a certain way. You know, I think all of us are raised with a certain way of beliefs, and that is absolutely fine, because we all know that we're human beings. Um, but yeah, that's what I would answer to that question.
Also, to add on to that, as a person that has a tendency to avoid social interaction in public, put your headphones on when you're waiting in line. That's a pro tip, so they don't talk to you. If you like, you know, like make sure that, as Ignacio said, that your beliefs are strong, and it's okay to, if a protester comes to you, it's okay to be like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. And you know, just be very respectful to them. Be like, hey, thank you for, you know, telling me that information. But thank you, I'm not interested, or I'll take that in consideration. And so just be very respectful. And typically with protesters, typically if you tell them like, thank you, have a nice day, they'll be like, all right, and they'll move on to the next person. And so
And I think that is our last question for now. I'll put out a second call real quick. If anybody has any more questions, you can raise your hand in the participants feature or leave one in the chat. I thought I saw Jen typing.
I was doing a Google search on voter intimidation laws in California to
I
see
knew
what is illegal. Voter intimidation at the polls is illegal. So there should not be protests happening when you go to vote. That said, you know, street curbs aren't an illegal place to stand. So if you were to go down to the elections office, I can't say that there won't be people out on Truxton. But yes, voter intimidation, illegal, call the police if it's happening when you go vote.
Yes, thank you all for, I'm going to second what Krystal said in the chat. Thank you all for your questions. They've been really great. We have about 10 minutes left, but if we don't have any more questions, we might want to wrap it up a little bit earlier. Vivian says, thank you. I got some good information on where to go for my voting questions, which is great. I'm glad to hear that this has been informative and helpful. Does anybody, any of the panelists have any last statements that they want to say to the audience or any bits of advice?
I'll say thank you all for coming out. Thank you to the runner for letting us be in the space, letting me be in the space. I really appreciate it. And with some final parting words, your voice matters. Even if you don't want to vote for president, even though that whole debate's going on, your vote matters for local, state, federal representatives. Your vote will help impact the course of our nation, our state, our county in the next 2 years. And so it's really important. If you have that right to vote, think of, you're not just voting for yourself, but also the future, the kids around you, yourself, the older folks that you interact with. And so it's important. And definitely, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to ASI, and feel free to attend the upcoming events for ASI and informative events that Ignacio is organizing very well.
So to add on to, well, my final words would be, being in this position in legislative affairs, it has been an amazing journey so far, because I'm able to make sure that students know what they're voting for. I want to tell students that we know right now we're pretty busy. We are doing midterms. We are doing a lot of homework assignments. Virtual learning is pretty draining sometimes, but just take a second to make sure that you are registered. If you haven't registered, you can also go to your CSUB account and register to vote, or you can go to any polling place as well on November 3rd, as well on the county elections office. Make sure your voice is heard, because we know that as students, we have the capability to changing the course of history. In the next coming days, we know that we have the ability to make sure that we vote on different things that better are going to affect us when we lead this generation forward. Our kids are going to be affected, our grandkids are going to be affected as well, and so forth. And I think for us, we have to keep those very same words that our founding fathers said, that we the people have the ability to create the change that we want to see. And we have the ability to also directly vote for people who represent us in Congress and in the state legislature. And with that being said, I want to say thank you to the runner for inviting me. It was an amazing opportunity to get my platform out and to make sure that students are civically engaged. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and to follow Ignacio, I mean, it's pretty hard. That was really, really amazing. But the same thing. Thank you to the runner for inviting me, letting me be a part of this. I think it was a really great space to kind of reach students, and I know this is going to be posted online, so it's an even greater possibility, to reach more students and to kind of share a perspective, because I think that's so extremely important. So yeah, just thank you, and to students watching, just remember that whether it has to do with voting or any other issues, ASI is a resource. We are here to serve you. And so we are accessible. I can be be reached via email, asi-president@csub.edu. We can be found on social media. So whatever you need, we're here to serve you. So yeah, just thank you to the runner again.
Awesome. And thank you all for attending. And of course, thank you to the panelists for agreeing to participate. I think this is going to conclude the Runner Wednesday, but I appreciate everybody who came to join us, and I appreciate everyone's perspective. So thank you so much. And the latest issue of the Runner is out on our website. It will be updated throughout today, actually. So you can look out for some of those updates. But yeah, thank you everybody. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.